Do we want to talk about some of these backups?
Yeah, so I thought we'd handle the two major backups first.
Yeah.
The first one being this story that's called, I think it's called Team Up Round 2.
Right.
Where it's like Jackpot and Spider-Man, taking on the Dichromator, who first appeared in issue 25 of this run, which was a backup that Todd Knock also drew, and he returns to do this here. It's not a villain I was expecting to ever return.
When have we ever?
And it was fine here as just another guy to knock over between MJ and Peter and throw Jonah into the mix. Why not?
Sure.
But I think the more interesting thing to talk about is the kind of final scene between Peter and MJ. And
Yep.
I have fairly strong feelings about this. I'm curious what you thought.
I mean, does that say it? I mean, why don't I think I'm going to agree with you? So why don't you get your strong feelings out, and then we can kind of riff off that, because I think that'll I'm admittedly looking at the notes here, and I'm like, talk, Dan, and let me react. Let me react.
Well, I'm curious if you had the same reaction reading this on the page as I did, where I totally thought that Aunt May was going to find out that Peter was Spider-Man. And in this story, I thought the setup was clearly Paul and Shay get to the double date early, and they're going to walk in and find them canoodling or hitting it off.
Right.
And it would wrap up that storyline and send Shay and Paul off into the Never Never Land, never to be talked about again. And that was how they were going to do it. And that was going to really piss me off, and I'm glad that they didn't do that.
Right. I don't know. I don't think I expected that, but
Okay.
I think the leaving the door open with Peter and MJ the way they did is just I don't know. I find it exhausting at this point, because it's. And then, I mean, let me preface that by saying, do you disagree that they left the door open here in some weird?
100%.
Yeah.
As much as I think Peter and MJ are the ultimate couple in this book.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of the will they, won't they?
Yeah.
I want them to just say, won't they?
We can't make this Ross and Rachel, guys. Come on. This is absurd. We either are going to just go in a different direction, or we're going to just say, hey, we know, to me, I don't typically buy into the idea that some fans have that this editorial office is actively trolling Spider-Man fans. But when you get something like this, it's hard to completely look the other way about that, because it's just all right, come on. You have made it very patently obvious over the last couple of years that you are not interested in telling the story of the two of them together. That if you want that story, go to Ultimate, go to one of the many other universes of Spider-Man comics that we tell where Peter and MJ are together. Go there. Don't come here. And, we can argue the merits of that. I have been very consistent in that, will they, won't they? I don't care. Tell good stories. But when you do something like this here, where you kind of have this Peter being well, I'll always come for you eventually, MJ. It's not even the I will always come for you. The eventually is so heavy-handed here. It's just eventually in this context could literally mean yeah, we're eventually we're going to be back together, MJ. I don't know. That's how I read it.
The heat death of the universe is coming.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. I mean, and Dan, this podcast could be dead and buried by the time that eventually comes true. Don't get me wrong, but it puts it out there into the universe, and on one end, it's an ongoing serial story. So yeah, eventually maybe they will revisit this. Maybe we'll get another Nick Spencer, and we won't have Nick Lowe, and all these other things will be happening, and Tom Brevoort won't be there anymore, being youth. Whatever it is, and we'll, tell this story again, and if it's good, I'll celebrate it. If it sucks, I'm gonna criticize it, whatever. But at the same time, it's just like with everything that has gone on over the last couple of years, like to shoehorn that in here, I'm just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like, don't do this, guys. Like, it made me groan in real time, and you know, I did not suspect that there was going to be any kind of heat necessarily between Shay and Paul, but like them inserting that whole MJ Peter thing in there made me want to rip my eyes out. Not because I don't want to see them together, but just because I know they don't actually intend to do anything about it anytime soon.
And I'm probably going to get even more cynical than you on this, which is to say, like, the opposite of love isn't hate, right? Or the opposite of passion isn't, like, you know, a hatred. It's indifference.
Sure.
And to me, this just shows that they have no plan. It's just going to go by like that eventually. I didn't even read it as like, we're going to find, I mean, of course I read it as we're going to find each other, but it's basically like, yeah, whatever the next guy feels like doing is what that's going to do. And we're going to leave the door open to that.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, because who knows where the story is, and we don't have any plans because everything eventually resets back to the norm.
Right.
And any change that we make is going to be temporary, and like, why do you care about this more than we do? You
right.
know, and it's truly deeply indifferent to me is how that read.
Yeah.
It's like eventually, because who knows what writer will want to do what, and we don't have a vision for this title.
Yeah.
So eventually, you know, and
we could all be dead by then, guys, you know, but you know, eventually.
Yeah, and the reason I really feel that way, like even that much more cynical about it, is because they don't even care about the story they're telling in this very issue.
Right.
Because the whole arc of the Zeb Wells run has been Peter like learning to move past MJ, if you really want to read into it that way. It's like him healing and recovering from that. So in the final issue to go, I'm still holding on to you, like, and I'm coming for you eventually, is like, well, then why did we go on this journey you just put us through?
Right.
Like, and it undermines the thing. Like, the next panel, they're in this restaurant with Shay, and it's like, he just admitted to MJ, this Shay thing's not going to work out because I'm going to keep coming after you. It's so deeply cynical that, like, nothing should be invested in. Like, that like, whatever, like Shay who? Why? Don't even care about investing in Shay because Peter clearly doesn't, you know? And I think it undermines the entire 60-issue arc that we just got done reading. You know, for all of the good stuff that I've commented even, it's like, hey, in one word, how do you undo like an entire story that you tried to tell?
Yep. Well said. I can't push back on any of that. Do we want to talk about, speaking of not knowing when to let go, do you want to talk about Chasm here?
Yeah, because, I mean, this is the same thing.
Yeah.
And, like, well, tell me what you thought about it, because I also have a very cynical take on it.
I was equally frustrated by Chasm here, because it was like, you know, I felt like at the end of the, God, what was that arc called? With you know, the Peter being the Spider Goblin.
Yeah.
I felt like we kind of had not necessarily a resolution, but just like some kind of point of moving on between Peter and Ben here, where it was like, all right, we're not going to be friends, but we're not going to be adversaries. I felt like that was where we were at. Like, it seems pretty apparent there. And, you know, we have this whole interaction between the two of them where we continue to build in that direction. And everything about the interaction, I was like, okay, yeah, you know, this works. Yep, you know, he's going to make a life for himself. He's got to move on. He's got to do this. All right, sounds good. And then it's like, we get to the end, and it's just like Chasm being like, I lied about everything. And it's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, what are we doing here? like, come on. Like, it's just as bad as everything else that we have gotten in this comic, where you're just like, are we gonna make a step forward or not? Like it's the smallness again. Like we cannot no one in this creative space right now wants to just take a giant step forward with anybody, and it's like, it's so outrageously cynical and silly, where you're just like, make a decision, guys. Like, make a choice to change a character, to evolve a character, to make someone grow, and they refuse to do it over and over again.
Just figure it out for yourself and get it done. All right, Jerry. But I can figure it out myself any way you want. Just do it.
This Chasm story made me, again, want to tear my hair out, because I was just like, what little is left? Not as little as you, Dan, but still little.
That might be why I'm more cynical than you about this story, which I'm going to get to in a moment, because I have no hair left.
There you go. There you go.
There is nothing holding me back any longer.
Sure. But, like, that's the thing. It's like make a choice to push a character forward, and they just won't. What are the stakes of moving Chasm forward? Like, what are we holding on to here? Like, no one has liked the story from the beginning. Why are you holding on to this? I don't know, Dan. What do you got?
Well, it's funny because, like, you and I think found something, and maybe I'm speaking for myself, but we found something interesting about the, like, initial idea of Chasm, which is like Ben has lost all of his memories of being Peter Parker. Who is this guy if he's not Peter Parker? Like, finally let him step out of Peter's shadow. And then when I was reading this, I was like, this is awesome. We're finally going to get that. Like, Ben is finally sitting down in an exact mirror composition to that great issue 75 of Volume 5 that kicked off the Beyond arc, where it was Ben being like, hey, I'm going to be Spider-Man. I don't need your permission. And here we're returning to that in the same exact cafeteria or cafe that they're at. It's framed exactly the same way. And Ben finally comes clean and he says, you know what? I actually was jealous of you. And I've gotten over it. And I'm moving on. And I'm going to redefine who I am, not in your shadow. And it's like, cool.
Yeah.
Like,
sign me
I
up.
want to see that concept.
Yeah.
I would read that title if they put out a Ben Reilly title,
sure,
where I was exploring who is this guy if he's not Spider-Man, which I know we've gotten a ton of times before, but like at least this one was spent time setting it up. Even if I felt like it was a weird continuation of the Chasm story, where like the last time we saw him, yeah, he technically saved Spider-Man, but like was trying to kill him, and you and I didn't understand that, although he acknowledges that here. And I was like, okay, like clean, like, all right. But then, like you said, it goes back to, that was all a lie. I'm still a villain. And the thing that came to my mind immediately was the conversation I had with Zeb Wells around issue 50 when he was signing my books. And I asked him to come on and do an interview with us, and he said he doesn't do it. But what he did, we got into a long conversation, and so you'll have to believe me when I say that this is what he told me, but I think about what he told me about Queen Goblin, which is that he intended to kill her off, when the sins were removed from her, and either turn her back into Ashley Kafka or kill that character off in general. And he was told, find another way to do it, because the Queen Goblin character, like, the first appearance of her was popular, and so it sold a bunch of books. It's a character. We don't want to lose that IP. We want to sell, toys of this character. And that's exactly what this felt like to me, was that Zeb Wells was like, here's how I want to end this story. And they were like, look, do your ending, but we can't have him go away because we want to sell Chasm action figures.
We got to keep the Chasm.
Right. And it's like, okay. And like, I do think there is a place for this villainous character that's deeply personal mirror to Peter, in that we don't have a Venom anymore.
Right.
But don't conclude the story that we should have gotten in the first place and then go, nope.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, like you said, you can use this character, but like, don't like don't keep pulling the rug out here. I mean, it's like no one benefits from this. Neither the character, the creators, or the fans, in my opinion, from a story.
And like, why make him like emotionally that self-aware that he could go to Peter and be like, yeah, this is exactly what's wrong with me.
Right.
You know, like I've been going to therapy and this is the conclusion that I came to. Actually, no.
I mean, let me just say it don't work like that. I wish it did.
Yeah, so deeply frustrating. And honestly, Mark, my cynical take is they didn't want to get rid of the IP, so they let him end the story the way it should have ended. And they said, but give us a couple pages so that we can keep doing what we want to do with it.